This is Up and to the Right, conversations on startups, tech, and design, brought to you by GoTime. What's up, Drew? Welcome. Thanks for having this conversation with me. My name's Phil from GoTime Design Studio. And so basically what I'm doing here is I'm inspired by the Unconference, if you've heard of that, and just kind of bringing people together, bringing interesting people who are doing interesting things and just hearing their stories, and basically taking the Unconference concept and applying it to podcast forms. This is actually, I was just before our call, I thought, maybe I should call this Go Time Untitled podcast,
Yeah.
Untitled
TBD.
Design Files. Yeah, TBD. I like TBD too, actually. That's nice. I might have to lift that from you.
Yeah.
But anyways, thanks for joining. Really appreciate having you.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I always love having these conversations, getting to chat with folks in the industry, people that are doing cool things, building cool stuff, and I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Yeah, so a lot of people are in search of the unicorn in the tech world, whether it's the the $1 billion valuation, or whether it's the full stack engineer, which is the unicorn. But you're a rare unicorn, the full stack. Can you tell me more about that journey?
Yeah, for sure. No, I love the full stack name to it. At least that works really
I know
well.
sometimes full stack is missing a very critical component.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, so I started my career in design, like really heavily into design, graphic design, branding. I was in a band, so it was heavy MySpace era. So yes, I am that many days old. Building lots of different kind of just typical straight up design things, but MySpace actually was my entry into web development, if you want to call it that. It was kind of loosely exposing me to web development. So then when I was in college, I spent more time getting into building websites. I was freelancing. I was in a program called digital media. So it was doing a lot of, computer science type things, more design, some film, getting into that area. So I really got invested there. I didn't know how to do any of the backend programming at all. So I had to outsource that to some companies. I didn't like having to outsource it. So I just wanted to learn it on my own. So that was picking up things like PHP and Ruby on Rails. So I spent a lot of time doing that. And then when I came out of college, worked in an enterprise, larger company, moved into an agency. That agency built a startup. That startup later got acquired. So that was like a very long journey of things. Really fun, enjoyed that experience. Really fell in love with front end development specifically. It was kind of the blend of all the things I liked. It had, the user experience side, it had the design, it was close to what the users were doing. It allowed me to interact and interface with designers and leverage design skills. But I also got to talk to backend developers and really understand, data and infrastructure and DevOps and kind of deeper kind of backend technologies. So I really enjoyed that. Ended up leaving that startup, had a couple of startups and products that I built for a couple months in my own. Enjoyed that experience, but then I ended up landing where I'm at today, which is Differential. Wanted to work remote and really got to come into that role as a senior engineer. I'm now chief product officer and shifting more into different things at this level, but still fundamentally the same things. I just like building stuff. I like making things and creation, design, engineering, strategy, all these pieces coming together to create a really valuable product.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that. Can you tell me a bit more about what you're up to at Differential these days?
Yeah, for sure. So, like I mentioned, I operate as chief product officer. We're still a pretty small company, so we're under 40 or so right now. I lead the studio side or the agency side of the business. So we do work for clients. We build some software products for them. We have product teams that work for different clients, usually 2 to 4 product teams running at once. So still kind of a small stable. Some of those clients we work with to try and commercialize their products into a SaaS product. So maybe they want to build it. We work with them to build it for their specific use case, but then try and commercialize it. We have a couple of those SaaS products in different phases of the life cycle currently that we're working with. So I spend a lot of time just working on the company, trying to source new leads, really trying to refine the product development process. We're really good at making sure we deliver high quality work on time, working with a lot of the team leads, the product leads that we have at the company. And then I'm usually leading 1 to 2 projects at a time myself, which I also enjoy because I think being, in a leadership position, but also really being able to practice your craft gives you the ability to have great line of sight into the day-to-day work and really develop processes that can support the team. So that's what I'm doing these days. And our mission statement is to rapidly unlock value for good people with meaningful ideas. So we just stick to that as kind of our core. Are we using that as our filter to figure out the right things to build. And that's what we're focused on.
Awesome. I really like that tagline. So, with a background in design and engineering, what unique perspective do you bring as the chief product officer?
Yeah, so I'm a huge believer. I don't think the term gets it's not as powerful enough because people like specialists, but I believe that generalists are a superpower. I think being a generalist is a superpower for a lot of reasons, and this isn't just design and engineering are obviously like closely related in building software products, but even if you extend beyond that, and it's you learn about psychology or you learn about different areas of science or all these different elements. Psychology has impacts on design because it's human behavior. So I think for me specifically with those disciplines, it just gives me a unique perspective around both sides. So design is all about, understanding visual communication and aesthetics and just overall user experience of things. And on the engineering side, it's about the underlying technology. It's really about understanding the feasibility of how you can build things and the actual software itself. And these pieces have to work together in unison to build a product. So I think when I approach something, I can kind of approach it from both of those sides and understand the inherent trade-offs there. So it gives me a unique perspective, but I also like to extend it beyond that and pull little mental models or ways of thinking from really obscure places. And I always encourage people to do that too, because it's like you could look at industrial engineering, you could look at all these different areas, physical products, and like just really anything can influence your overall taste and perception and perspectives of the world. And I think that that's super important.
Yeah, that background in engineering that helps you stay sort of grounded in the feasibility. I think of Dribble or platforms like that, where it's kind of all pie in the sky and it's completely detached from engineering. And then you said design and engineering are closely related, and yeah, in if everything is working as it should, yeah, absolutely. But I think so often too, sometimes they're so disconnected, and engineers just want to build and don't care about the aesthetics or anything. Design just wants to think about the aesthetics without thinking about, is this feasible? So but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
in an ideal world, yes, design and engineering are intertwined and very closely connected. I was wondering, what's the biggest mistake people make when building something from 0 to 1?
Yeah, it's a very interesting problem. I think there's a lot of companies struggle with this when they get larger. It's harder. A lot of times they'll spin up. There's a special group that they're detached from all processes and they get to go build 0 to 1 because it requires kind of this almost incubation environment. And I think like the biggest things that I see or what I've found, at least in terms of mistakes people make when building something 0 to 1, is focused around either going too deep on one thing or trying to do too many things. So when you're going too deep on one thing, like, and both of those are really about momentum. And that's what's crucial in building 0 to 1. So the analogy I like is you're putting together a chair and you don't go and screw each of the individual screws all the way flush. You go around and you screw each one a little by little so that they're all kind of even until you get them all flush so it fits together. And building 0 to 1 is just like that. You're trying to continually cover a lot of ground, circle, refine, and iterate, but you're not going so deep on it. And the reason for that is there's a lot of unknowns lurking, and all of the tension points that happen in a system and in software, and really in any system in general, come from those integration points. So it's where those two pieces meet. So if you're really going too deep on one thing and focus too far on one area, you're not seeing how that feature or that area of the product interacts with other things. So you're not getting a chance to find those unknowns and address them quickly. And I think that going too deep, doing too many things is a similar kind of theme there, where you're covering too much ground. You're increasing the surface area. There's more things that you can cover. You're not decreasing the amount of things that you can focus on, the scope of work that allows you to go deeper. And I think that that's something that is really a core part of building 0 to 1, because it's all about momentum and making sure you're building momentum on the right things and being able to consistently refine as you go through it and make steady progress. And I think that's really what matters with momentum, is like, can you make steady progress? Can you check things off? And it requires thinking about not going too deep and making sure that you're not covering too much stuff at once. You're kind of narrowing that scope.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about my mind is kind of blown by, I don't know if you've seen those services where you can have someone come to your house and they'll assemble the IKEA furniture that you bought. That just kind of
Yep.
blows my mind. So
Yeah.
it's hilarious. There might be a lot of people out there who don't even know how to put together a chair, so they don't even understand that analogy. But I totally agree, and I'm thinking about how if you do build something wrong, you're basically sitting on a two-legged chair and you're about to fall over. But and arguably design, you're thinking about the whole user experience. You're thinking about every aspect from the human perspective. So arguably what you said was kind of all through the lens of design. But if I did kind of re-ask that question, what's the biggest mistake building something from 0 to 1 through the lens of design? How would you answer that any differently?
I think that when you're thinking about it from a design perspective, the mistake is usually not thinking through and really building out the visual language early and in concert with development. So I've seen this a lot with building early on, where it's the same thing with progress. You're trying to understand momentum, you want to see progress, and I think like understanding how the visual language interacts with things, because design is more than just how it looks. It also is part of how it works. I mean, it's how it functions, especially in products. It's the user experience, knowing the layout of things. And I think that visual language, if you really build it out early on in concert with development, you can get a better sense for how the overall product should work and feel. And it honestly will inform a lot of development decisions. I think people miss that a lot of times, that you can design something a certain way to look a certain way that can inform the development. And then flip happens on the other side. You can also build things and that informs, oh, let's maybe design things this way because of that. So I think they really have to work in unison. So I think, just to summarize it, it's like the mistake is really just not putting that big emphasis on design and how it integrates with development early on. So I think they just have to work in concert when you're building 0 to 1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of the inverse of that. I love design systems personally, but I think a lot of times design systems are kind of built in almost in isolation. And it's just, okay, I'm going to make these buttons and these colors and all that. And I personally really think that's a bad practice. And my approach to building out design systems is to take, obviously design the buttons and all the states for all that, but also in tandem at the same time, be thinking about and designing out what are those key screens, what are those key experiences and features, and how do all these sort of puzzle pieces fit within that UI and that experience and that flow. So anyways, that was a little tangential. I want to hear from you more so than talk about myself, but I am curious, what have you helped build that you're most proud of?
Yeah, I've had a lot of things over the years, but I try and think back to, like, what are the things that had like the best outcomes to them, that really they leaned into my skill set, allowed me to change and grow, but also really just had an ultimate impact on people, on the products. And there was a platform that I worked on called Code School. This was one of the startups that I was a part of. It was an online education platform. So essentially teaching people how to code, do it in your browser. So you don't have to download all these things onto your computer. You don't have to figure out how to finagle your development environment. You could just learn video lessons and then do code challenges. So it used to take us about 2 months or so to do these fully custom, highly designed themes for all of the courses that we released. Like we would pick, a zombie theme, or, all these different kind of,
I think I
it's
remember
80s
these
retro. Yeah,
back in
we
the
went
day. I did
we
that
went
couple.
really far out, and it was great because they had these like unique themes. But then obviously we hit a point where, that was a long, curve and long time to get those built out. So we ended up building a platform, which I had a big hand in building all the front end for it. That took that time from 2 months all the way down to about 2 hours. And this was just through a lot of kind of standardizing the design, making sure that you could customize the individual designs. There's still some of the uniqueness to it. But I think the reason I love that and I looked so fondly on that work is because it blended all the things I enjoy. It's design, it's engineering, and my love of efficiency. So getting
Mhm.
things down to that. But when I reflect on it, it's realizing that, that enabled us to create more courses that we could get
Mhm.
out more quickly, that users could take, so more people could learn. We could grow the business. It was matching the user desires with the business objectives. And I think that was the thing that I really enjoyed. When you can see outcomes like that, that's something that you can be proud of.
Absolutely. Well, I think about how you said that, and also you're kind of proud of building a process, and what you're doing there, you're shrinking down this process a lot, 10x or whatever, so that you both meet the business needs, like you said, but also you're meeting the aesthetic, the visual needs. You're creating this branded, memorable experience without it being too costly for the business. So that's really cool. What are your thoughts on the return on investment or the ROI of design? I know sometimes C-suite people don't really, they have a lot of other very numerical things in there, a lot of other key metrics in their mind, and it can be hard to connect the ROI to design specifically. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, for sure. So I mean, I think a lot of the products that are probably best and the ones that are out there that people love the most. I mean, they're founders or CEOs, whatever you want to think of them, that do understand the value of design, or they're designers themselves. I mean, obviously Steve Jobs would be the quintessential example of just somebody who deeply understood design, and I'm fairly certain that worked out pretty well for Apple, having somebody that was thinking that way. But I mean, I think in terms of design and the ROI and how you think about it, I think it's more important than ever right now, especially when you look at the age of AI, specifically generative AI and design world. We're going to get to a place, and I think it'll evolve and get better. But right now, a lot of that is very sterile. The designs that come out, and if you tell ChatGPT to write you a 10,000 word blog post about the ROI of design, it'll answer it. It'll be 10,000 words, but it'll have no personality, no voice. It'll be very sterile. And I think creative work,
Call that
it can
AI
have that problem.
splaining. It'll AI
Yeah, AI
splain.
explaining. That's a great way to put it. Yeah, but I mean, it really does that. And I think in the design perspective, you get these designs that you can get them out there quickly, but I think it loses a lot of that personality, and that's really what people love. And I think that's where design really comes to life. And I think if you're looking at how to measure it, obviously it's a massive differentiator. Having a good taste and understanding what looks good and what feels good and has a personality, that's going to be really valuable. But honestly, even just looking at metrics like user engagement and customer satisfaction, like those are things that can easily be tracked. And if you have a product that's well designed, it should enable those users to perform that task efficiently, effectively, and enjoyably. So that's something that design enables. So if they can do that, then those user engagement scores are higher, the customer satisfaction is higher, and then ultimately you're helping them reach their outcome that they're trying to do, which is to resolve whatever pain point, reach their desired end state. And I think that has like a very real impact that can be measured, and honestly should be measured. And it shouldn't be purely based on the development of the product, because I think development probably can be more hidden in a lot of ways than design can.
Yeah.
Yep. Alliteration in threes. You got to hit all the little pattern matching things that our brains like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. But I was curious, what are your thoughts? I have my own opinions on what is it, the NPS?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that it?
Yeah. Net
NPS?
promoter score.
Yeah, that's it. What are your thoughts on that? Do you like that one as a way to measure?
So it was the de facto, like, this is, make sure, like, what's your net promoter score, understanding how you sit on that. And then I will have to find the source for this, but I do know that, like, the creator of the net promoter score even called out, like, yeah, this thing got bigger than I thought. It's probably not the best gauge, which is, I think it's sort of it's a quintessential example of what happens in general, that we sort of just adopt the thing and no one really stops and go like, hey, one, why did we adopt this in the first place? What's the context? And is it still relevant today? So one thing that I've seen recently, the shift has been more from net promoter score to customer satisfaction score. So instead of asking how likely are you to recommend to a friend, so the logic behind it is, that's a weird question, because how often you're assuming that the person is the type of person that recommends software to their friends.
Mm.
And that's kind of an odd, it's sort of an odd thing. Not a lot of people do. You may love a piece of software, but you don't go around telling your friends to use it, because it depends on your friends. And, so that's, the question can kind of skew things. So the customer satisfaction score is just, how satisfied are you with the product, getting a sense for that. So it's more individual. It's less reliant on this social behavior. So I've shifted more towards customer satisfaction score in anything that I've measured. And I enjoy that a little bit more and it seems more accurate than net promoter score.
Yeah. One thing that was nice or is nice about NPS score is that it's standardized. Does this customer satisfaction score have a standardized approach to it?
I think somewhat, but you can usually, I mean, yeah, net promoter score, because it's more widely used across the industry, it has more of a standard. Hey, it's 1 to 10. X to X is, these different categories that they set. And I think customer satisfaction score is sort of like, well, you can do 1 to 5, you can do 1 to 10, you can grade it differently. So, I mean, it's a little less standardized, but I'm hoping that it kind of goes the way of net promoter score and becomes more industry standard until we find a problem in that. And then there's the new one.
Yeah, we all start complaining about it. Yeah, but that is one of the nice. There's definitely some drawbacks to the NPS score, but how it's standardized, I think that also helps. That was almost kind of it was almost designed to be adopted, because everyone is pretty unique and memorable as well, and so that way you're able to kind of compare and contrast apples to apples. Even though I personally think it has its drawbacks. You're right. I can't remember the last time that I can't. This software, this new app that I use is really awesome. To a friend. I don't know when the last time I did that was, but what do you think that CEOs misunderstand about design?
That's a great question. I mean, I've been fortunate that I've worked with a lot of CEOs that understand design and its importance. I think I referenced Steve Jobs earlier. Obviously, there's those are the people I think about that just deeply understood it. And I think what gets misunderstood the most is just design is about emotion. That there's there's an understanding of design and how things look, but understanding the underlying drivers of human behavior around emotions. And I think everybody kind of understands that inherently, that that looking at art or looking at design can influence your emotions, but understanding the power behind that, and when you understand how to evoke emotions, you're creating environments where users can feel connections to your product, and it can help them connect to what it enables for them, which is ultimately the outcomes that they're trying to get. There's the jobs to be done theory, which is about users hire products for a job. I want it to do a specific thing for me. So the more that you can help them connect with that, the more that you can create that driver. And then the other thing I was thinking about with this is that we talk a lot about the products in general in the context of the hero's journey. So, the typical, we're watching a movie, reading a book, and it's the, Star Wars, Luke Skywalker, the standard hero's journey. And it's that they're, engaged in some sort of conflict, and then they're changing and persevering, and then they're coming out on the other side better. They've reached their goal. They've pushed through that adversity. And I think that that's really like, those are the big emotions that are part of this. And your users can kind of fulfill that hero's journey. And I think that that's super valuable, and something that I feel like isn't thought about enough, and just in terms of how important design is to that it is your first impression that people have with your products. And like I mentioned before with generative AI, I feel like the better that first impression, the more differentiated that first impression is, the higher the likelihood that you're creating a successful product with the right outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Story Brand, the whole Story Brand framework deals a lot with the hero's journey and you being the guide to helping the company itself being the guide and the customers themselves are the heroes. Do you have any thoughts on the Story Brand framework?
I have not used that one specifically, but I've read a couple books that do like user story kind of mapping. I forgot the exact name of it. And I think it was Donna Lichel, I believe she wrote the book. And it was talking a lot about user story, user journey, and trying to map your product and your user on that story arc. So I think I am a fan of it, because I think it puts you in that frame of reference where they are the hero. This is about them. This is about how we can enable them. And it's also outcome driven too. Like you're trying to get them to a certain place. And I think like having that understanding, it's like you're clarifying the problem that they're experiencing today as a real human being suffering with something, trying to reach this end state, and how can you get them there? So I feel like, a lot of times things get too gamified, and, personas, and you get to a level where you create this shield, and it's like the closer you can get to the user and trying to help them reach their end state and really deeply understanding why they're trying to get there in the context of their world, I really think that matters a lot. So I haven't used that one specifically, but similar things that really kind of view it from that light, and I think it's great.
Yeah, I like the Story Brand framework because it taps into these timeless ideas, the hero's journey. I mean, obviously, I haven't read Joseph Campbell's book on it. I should, but you look at all these ancient myths and whatnot, and there's something just deeply true about it. And so tapping into that is, I think, a win. Impossible to lose if you're doing it right.
Oh, for sure. And I think it's just from because if it's ultimately about storytelling, I think we all know how important storytelling is. Like humans have evolved on that. And to your point, there are cave paintings that are illustrating a story, and ancient times through up until today. And we still have that connection. And I still think it's fundamentally about emotions. So I think that's again where design can tell a story. It can create emotion. If you think about the user journey that way, you are creating a story, you're understanding how design and emotions impact and drive that behavior. And I think ultimately you're creating a product that just right now feels more human. And I think that that's something that we probably need more of.
Yeah, I agree. What advice do you have for anyone building something right now?
Honestly, I think momentum is everything. You just have to get started. You don't need to overthink and pre-plan steps 90 through 100 and think about this giant checklist, especially in software development where there's all this latent complexity that you will not understand or even be able to know what is there. It's the unknown unknowns until you actually do the work. So I think ultimately it's about building momentum. It's figuring out the first step you can take. So don't worry about this, giant staircase of steps to reach whatever I'm trying to reach, or the mountain, whatever analogy you like. just think about like, what's the one next step I can take that'll move me forward? And that's your momentum. And then, you're in Newton's first law of motion, that an object in motion tends to stay in motion. You're creating inertia. You're the one that's pushing those things forward. And I think ultimately, if you're consistent, you're building momentum, you're producing information, you're learning, that's going to create an environment where you can resolve all the problems that you want to resolve, like understanding what problem should I solve? Why is it important? Who am I solving it for? All those things that everybody tries to pre-plan. If you're really just trying to drive momentum, create action, and get answers and learn along the way and just build that momentum, you'll get those answers. You'll get there. So I think my biggest thing is just, if you're going to build something, the only way to do it is to do it. So just start and build some momentum.
Yeah, no, I love the way you put that. I think back and reflect on my own career, both my own career, my entrepreneurial journey, and it's really that momentum that is key, that in my own story that has been key to get me, from one step to the next and the next. And even though, I've chased after some dumb ideas, but it's still it was that momentum that carried me along to get to where I am today. And still that momentum that I have now is carrying me to where I'm going to get tomorrow as well.
Oh, and I totally agree. Because even when you call out, like, somebody might objectively look at something and say, that was a failure that I did. This didn't reach the success that I wanted. It's like, well, that's still momentum. That's still answers. That's still learning. Like, those are opportunities. Like, you don't really ever get to success without the failure first. And it's part of that journey. And I feel like the more that people lean into that and just build that momentum, like, it'll take you there. You just got to make sure that you're continuing to figure out what the right next step is and just charge after that. Break it down as small as you can, and just that momentum. I really do believe, like, I've felt that so much for myself. It's like, if you can just start generating the momentum, it'll take you on the path you need to go.
Do you have any metrics to measure momentum?
That's a great question. I don't think I mean, for me, I try and figure out what are the leading indicators for anything, really. It's like, what are the things that I can do that I know if I do more of it, it'll net the outcomes that I want. So I'm a big believer in, achieving goals are just byproducts of systems. So I think to build momentum, the way that I would look at it is typically trying to define, like, what's a metric, what's a thing that I can track daily, weekly, monthly, at some interval, that as long as I just do one of these things each day, then I know it'll drive it better. So, give you an example. If I want to do, more networking outreach and kind of like talk to more people, it's like, well, okay, can I talk to one person every day? And I just check that box. Or can I reach out to one person to send a message to see if they want to have a conversation or talk further, and just check that box? I think that's what can build you the momentum. And the nice part is you've built a habit out of it. And habits are the best form of momentum in the world, because they're just the things that
Hmm.
self-perpetuate. But then you also have a metric that, cool, I've gotten some outcomes that this has served me well. I would love to do more of it. You just have to increase the amount of things you're doing on that same interval. So, like, to me, that's the system behind it. Is like, you have a way to track it and you have a path for continuing to do it. So that's usually the best way that I try and tackle it, is the same thing. It's just figure out what's the one small thing that I can do regularly, start there. That'll build some momentum, and it'll tell me whether or not I should do more of it, less of it, none of it.
Yeah. You're reminding me of James Clear's Atomic Habits, and how there's those compounding effects of even the tiniest habit compounds over time and has incredible results attached to it. And I think it was in that book as well where James Clear was talking about how basically to set a goal for going to the gym, don't even basically set the goal, don't make it, I'm going to lift this much weight, or I'm going to run for this amount of time. Make your goal so tiny that I'm going to open the front door to the gym, because then that's, even such a small thing, it kind of cascades, because if you get to the gym, you're not going to just open the door and turn around and so on. So I really like that kind of concept, and it's just very approachable for me.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that's similar to what I just mentioned about building momentum, figuring out that first step. It is 100% true. It's like, don't, and I think he even has somewhere it's like, just you put on your gym clothes,
Hmm.
like that step, like, just do something that becomes an enabler for that. That's really small, because then it's the friction. You're trying to lower the friction. You're trying to make it as easy as possible to get started and get moving. And then you can ratchet it up from there, but you need to build that system. So it's like that is part of it. So I think, yeah, in the habit building world, that is 100% true. It's like, start small. I think that's where people probably go a little crazy. It's like, I want to run a marathon. Well, I'm going to run, 10 miles every day. It's like, well, don't set the goal there. It's like, you just need to run one time. Just go put your shoes on, your running shoes, and get ready, go stretch, figure out what are those, like, small things you can do to get moving. But yeah, I think there's a lot of corollaries there between building systems and building products and how we can enable things for users too.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, what do you wish was built that isn't built yet?
One thing that's always like stuck around for me for a really long time has just been something that truly solves the problem of meal planning. It's kind of an interesting space. Like there's lots of things that do it, and I've thought about this deeply because I've wanted to build it myself, but time and side projects and all that. But trying to have something, and I think the problem with it is that it requires preferences. It requires understanding like individual preferences, types of things you want, and understand it needs some level of understanding of what ingredients you have, inventory, physical inventory, the ingredients you would need for a given recipe. So then you're kind of in the digital space, building grocery lists on what you can buy, kind of figuring out the gap between what you have, what you don't have. There's all these different environments it's operating in. So I think I've seen a lot of products that have solved, we can give you a recipe and tell you what ingredients you would need. And sure, you can add all of your own ingredients, but that's a heavy lift on manual work. And, I've gone to that extent before to track all ingredients in some giant Notion database and figure it out, but it's very untenable. So
Mm-hmm.
that's something I really wish was built. And this is more personal. We cook a lot of our own food and or all of our own food, and we do a lot of meal planning, and that's always been just this pain point. And I think it's because it's not a purely like physical product, physical space solve or a digital solve. It has a lot of elements to it. I think AI can enable a little bit with some of the personalization, but there's still some gaps there. And I think that's an interesting one that I'd love to see built.
Please build that because I will buy it.
Yeah, I know. I think a lot of people would. I feel like if that can be solved.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's definitely. I mean, it's one of the big things on my to-do list right now to figure out a system to solve meal planning in our home. Because similar to you, we cook almost all of our own food and whatnot, and it's just is extremely time consuming. And yeah, there's one app that I use called Mela, Mela. That's really nice for organizing your recipes. It still isn't, solving those meal planning. You can even kind of take a bunch of different recipes that you already have in there and create a grocery list with it. But, like you said, it doesn't touch on what do you have, what's your inventory currently. And yeah, there's just still a lot of problems to be solved around meal planning, and it's a huge pain for us. So, um, yeah, I'll collaborate on that with you if you want.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, and I think even the one that gets missed a lot is just even we're end of the month. We don't want to go buy more groceries. We kind of want to make do with what we have. Can something just tell me, here's the stuff you can cook based on what you have? Like we always call it, like we're just, scrounging things together at the end of the month just with what we have. Like we'll do the big run, just grocery stores later on. But I feel like solving that problem would be huge.
Hmm. Yeah, my wife is she went to culinary school. She's basically a human supercomputer. She's able to basically look in the pantry and the fridge and whatever is kind of left over, and she'll make this amazing soup out of it. Soup is her specialty. And then we'll have someone over like, oh, can I have the recipe for this? Is also she's like, no way.
I just
it's,
made it up.
it's just this and that
Yeah.
and all together. So yeah, it's definitely challenging. I certainly could not do the same way. It's incredible to be able to just take. It's almost like I think she just looks at it and kind of improvises. And yeah, I don't know how she does it, but we need to take her knowledge and turn it into a product.
Yeah, I mean, it's 100% an art like anything else. It's like design. I mean, there are some principles. It's like understanding, different flavor profiles and things that go well together, and salt and sweet, and all the different elements there. But then there's also just like this unbelievable art of people like your wife that can just put together something based off of like, yeah, this feels right. My wife will always say that like she genuinely believes like love is in the food, love is part of that. There's some like mystical ingredient that gets included, and I think there's something to that. So I don't know. It's a hard problem to solve because maybe it's so innately human. Parts of it, I would have to figure out like what's the software equivalent.
But yeah, I think there's something there though. I think it's doable to solve that problem at least partially. Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you, Drew. Really appreciate your time. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about what you're up to and what you're building?
Yeah, for sure. So I have a personal website. So all my socials and everything is always my full name, lowercase, no spaces. So drewbarontini.com is my website. I'm also on Twitter. I'll call it Twitter forever, Twitter X at Drew Barontini, and also on LinkedIn as well, Drew Barontini. So you can find me on all those places.
Awesome. Thanks, Drew. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Yep.
Cheers.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about how to grow your business with design, go to gotimehq.com.